Over Thanksgiving break, my friend and I went to Washington, D.C. We walked down on the Mall of America, into the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and spent a day at the Arlington Cemetery. We took pictures in front of the obelisk and the Lincoln Memorial and went to the Capitol. Next to the white dome of the Capitol is the United States Supreme Court, white, elegant in its Greek marble shell. Walking up the stairs, we recognized what was written in big uppercase letters on the gable of the beautiful building: Equal justice under law. This made me think, does this ideal really exist in today's America? A country divided by the recent election, a country where the racial debate is as heated as ever, a country where police has a history of unjustified violence against black males. This history was not only made by Michael Brown in Ferguson or Akai Gurley in Brooklyn, just to name two of many examples. This history was also made right in front of our doors, here in Philadelphia. Therefore, I will examine the move bombing of 1985 and connect it to Ta-Nehisi Coates' work Between the World and Me. The author is known to be one of the most important Afro-American writers actively addressing the racial issues of our time. Firstly, it is important to understand what the MOVE organization was, what their goals were, and how they tried to achieve them. MOVE was originally founded as the Christian Movement for Life in 1972. The founder, John Africa, advocated radical green politics. A return to a hunter-gatherer society had a strong opposition to science, medicine, and technology. To show their connection to their cultural ancestry, all members of the MOVE changed their surnames to Africa. They lived together in a part of West Philadelphia and were known for their demonstration, always through a bullhorn and dominated by profanity, were mostly targeted at opposed institutions like zoos or speakers the group disagreed with. This aggressive strategy to voice their opinion did draw a lot of attention from the local authorities and ultimately led to violence, which found its tragic end in the 1985 MOVE bombing. The group's most meaningful confrontation with Philadelphia police forces before the incident of 1985 was in 1978, when Mayor Frank Rizzo ended months of negotiations by ordering the police to storm the house that was the group's headquarters at that time. During the occurring shootout, Officer James Ram Jr. was killed after he was shot in the neck. 9 members of the MOVE group were convicted of the death of the officer and sentenced to life in prison. MOVE activist Ramona Africa, the lone survivor of the 1985 MOVE bombing, claims that the officer was killed by his own colleagues, as the authorities couldn't really see but emptied their guns in the dark basement where the 1978 conflict occurred. MOVE went on to publicly protest the sentence of their members over the years. It stated that this, combined with their radical lifestyle, they built an animal shelter which blocked one of the alleys of the neighborhood, and supposedly there were rats in their house, led to complaints of the neighbors. Police reacted to these complaints and used them to make a move on the MOVE house, as Mayor Goetz is quoted in an article of the Philadelphia magazine published in 2015. What followed is a day that was described as one that forever changed the city, and the one that Philadelphia became the city that bombed itself. The MOVE bombing occurred on May 13, 1985. After repeated complaints of neighbors in middle-class West Philadelphia, police reported to the property of friends for several members of MOVE. After the police officer were denied entrance to the building and MOVE members refused to turn themselves into custody, a shootout erupted. In a time span of under 90 minutes, more than 10,000 bullets were fired, and tear gas was used to drive the inhabitants out of their houses. In addition, the Philadelphia Fire Department used a water monitor on the residency to force MOVE members to come out. Since all actions taken by the police seemed to be failing, Commissioner Samber ordered then to bomb the property. The infamous move bombing occurred at 5:28 p.m. when a mix of C4 and Tovex, an explosive normally used for underground explosions, was dropped on top of the building. Flames erupted in the aftermath of the explosion, but the strategic fire soon became a phantasmagoric inferno. At the end of the night, it would have destroyed over 60 buildings of the neighborhood, as firefighters were firstly ordered to stay away from the flames, to let it force the move members out of their building. This actually happened, as it got very, very hot in the house, and the smoke was getting thicker, as the only female survivor of the bombing, Ramona Africa, described. As Move was making its way out of the building, including women and children, they were running towards the waiting police officers, hollering that they were coming out, that they're bringing the children out. Still, they were met with a barrage of police gunfire. Although it is not proven to be true, there are several reports that children and adult members of MOVE were killed by police fire. In the end, 11 MOVE activists died in the fire and shooting. Ramona Africa and Birdie Africa were the only two survivors. Ramona was arrested immediately after she had escaped the fire and was sentenced to prison. The MOVE bombing became one of the prime examples of the ubiquitous institutionalized racism of the United States. After the incident occurred, the Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission, which was also known as MOVE Commission, investigated the bombing. It found several facts that proved the unnecessary violence used by the police, and that Mumia Abu Jamal's, a former member of the movement, accusation of Philadelphia's police and fire department committing an urban holocaust is not as abstruse as it first seems. The MOVE Commission concluded that although the residents of the MOVE headquarters were dangerous, had firearms, used threats, abuse, and intimidation to provoke confrontation and terrified their neighbors, the police did completely mishandle the situation and brought unjustified and ineffable suffering upon the MOVE activists. Firstly, Mayor Goetz failed to deal with the movement early in its administration, decided to act out a policy of appeasement which was doomed to fail, according to the Commission. Also did the police fail to develop an adequate plan for the confrontation. In addition, the firing of over 10,000 rounds of ammunition was in no way appropriate and should have been controlled or stopped. The plan to bomb the MOVE house was reckless, ill-conceived, and hastily proved. Dropping a bomb on an occupied row house was unconscionable and should have been rejected out of hand. Still, the fire was used as a tactical weapon, which was completely inappropriate. Police gunfire prevented some occupants of 6221 Osage Avenue from escaping from the burning house to the rear alley. 5 children were killed during the confrontation on May 13, 1985. Their deaths appeared to be unjustified homicides which should be investigated by a grand jury. 6 adults also died as a result of the May 13th confrontation. The Commission points out the incredible injustice which occurred on May 13, 1985, and recommended criminal and civil trials against the city and its authorities. However, there were no criminal charges against anyone involved in the incident. A formal apology of Mayor Goetz and financial compensation for Ramona Africa were the two only things the report resulted in. Again, the United States, the state of Pennsylvania, and the city of Philadelphia failed to open their eyes to a violent act against African American citizens, committed by a Caucasian-dominated department, an act, as the MOVE Commission pointed out, that would have never happened had the MOVE house and its occupants been situated in a comparable white neighborhood. This ubiquitous institutionalized racism is also a topic of Goetz's work Between the World and Me. The author talks about his experience with racism growing up in the United States of America. He talks about fear of his body, which he is confronted with in every day of his life. African Americans experience a lack of respect for their bodies, founded on a deeply rooted construct of American society, which is called white privilege, and divides society into different groups. One group is the privileged white population, which does not have to fear their bodies, their security, as society and government protects them, with applying consequences to those who hurt the white body. The other group is the African Americans, people with black skin. They live in constant fear of their own body. American history has led to a society which does not value black life. There is no difference between the young criminal African American which pulls out a gun to threaten another African American, or the white police officer who shot Prince Jones, who was a friend of the author. In US society, violence against the black body mostly does not face any severe consequences. The move bombing is another example of that fact. Although the case was examined and it was concluded that excessive force was used, that Philadelphia had bombed its own citizens, that children were deliberately killed, that men and women were shot at while escaping a fire, nobody was held accountable. And as time went on, people started to forget that the bombing even occurred. Today, Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love again, not the city that bombed its own people. Another aspect that links the move bombing to Goetz and his work is the fact that the incident is a perfect example of the author's argument that racism is not a concept but a choice. The commission literally stated that the incident would have never happened had the move house and its occupants been situated in a comparable white neighborhood. Writer Michael Cord finds powerful words to what the choices of Mayor Goetz, the Philadelphia Police Department, the Philadelphia Fire Department, and every single police officer and firefighter involved led that day. They led to the death of 11 human beings, including 5 completely innocent and defenseless children, the destruction of 61 homes, and the incineration of thousands of family photos, high school and college sweetheart love letters, heirloom jewelry, inscribed Bibles and Korans, and many other totally irreplaceable mementos. The choice to confront the MOVE activists with a police force of about 500 officers, the choice to fire over 10,000 rounds of ammunition at the house, the choice to drop a bomb on a building with men, women, children, and babies inside, the choice to use fire as a strategic weapon in your own city, the choice to open fire on escaping members of the group, the choice to not immediately fight against the flames, the choice to not stand up to their own mistakes and injustice, and the choice to forget. The day on that Philadelphia bombed its own people is a clear example of the existence of racism in the United States. Mia Abdul-Jabbar was right when he said, "But on that day, more than the MOVE members died, the city died too. Its politicians died, its media died, its courts died, and its churches and houses of worship died, for they ceased to function, and they served power and money. In a very real sense, the city massacred itself, for one's faith in such institutions died." Equal justice under law, the key principle of the United States Supreme Court, and yet it seems to only exist if you have a white body. Problem is not the words of the laws, at least since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But what do words mean if the eyes of the people enforcing it still see color? The Roman goddess of justice, Justitia, is blindfolded for this exact reason. She is free of bias, free of the burden of seeing color. Racism is a problem in the United States. It has always been, and it will sure be in the future, if we just look at the results of the last election. But I'm also a firm believer that racism is a choice, and people have the option to make the right choice every time they're facing a decision. And while there are too many examples of Americans making the wrong decision, as we have seen in the MOVE bombing, the shootings of Michael Brown, Akai Gurley, and many other African Americans, it is our obligation as people living in this country to fight racism every day. There cannot be true freedom until we are all equal. And this starts with every single of our choices.